Hi, this is Anne-Marie Zanzal,
And I'm Tonda McKay.
and this is our Wednesday Night Live. We have these every Wednesday night at 6:30 Central Time. For those of us who don't know us, as again, my name is Anne-Marie. I'm one of the admins of one of the groups that you're in. I'm somebody who came out later in life. I came out 6 years ago, and tonight we're going to talk about something that's often a really big topic in our community, and that's talking to your kids about coming out to your kids. So for me, I did have to come out. I have 4 kids. By the time when I came out, my children were between the ages of 12 and 24, so they were a little older. And my 2 older children already knew I was gay. I had told them years ago. In fact, my oldest daughter, who was 24 at the time, I had come out to her sort of unofficially when I was 16, in the sense of when she was 16. Sorry, so I had already come out to her, but it wasn't like an official coming out. It was more like, hey, if something ever happens to Dad and I, don't be surprised if I end up with a woman. So I always think about her as the first person I came out to. And I also came out to my second child, who is non-binary, a couple of years before as well. Now, my 2 boys were my 2 youngest. They at the time were 19 and 12, and I had to come out to them as well. I wanted to, because I sort of really wanted them to know what was going on. They knew there was something going on between their dad and I, and it was such a big piece for me that I really wanted to share it with them. So I told the both of them together, and their reactions went from sort of like they were like, oh, okay, and then really, like a lot of times with kids, didn't talk about it much after that. So we've been thinking about, how do we come out to kids, right? And so the first age we want to talk about are those people that are little ones that are under 10 or 11. On the sheet, it says, 2 to 12. For those who have gotten the sheet, we've got some tips there. But so first, let me say something. Children, all have different developmental milestones, right? And so some kids may be very mature at 9, while some people don't really start to get mature until they're 13 or 14. So all of these guidelines are really based on like a variety of ages. And so I'm going to say that usually when people come to me, and those, especially those who have little kids. So for me, little kids means like 10 and under, 9, 10 and under, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, before they get to middle school. That's little kids. And oftentimes those mamas, those adults in their life, are so worried about them and how it's going to affect the children. Tonight, we're only going to talk about coming out. So, as you can see, my wife is being strangely quiet. And why is this, Tonda?
Well, I've never had children.
Right. And so, like, when we've sort of agreed when we do these lives that, well, those of us, like, as you know, when we were talking about all the lesbian dating sites and stuff like that, I've never done that. So I was quiet about that when we were talking about it. But we do have a list. And so let's go through our first one, which is kids that are like 10 and under. Should you come out to them?
Yes.
Yeah. And why do you think so?
Well, you should always, first of all, there's nothing wrong with being gay, and you should always let your children see who you are.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things about kids, especially when change is happening, they just want to be reassured that we love them. And so one of the things when we're having conversations like this is to really, make sure the kids know that they're still that. I mean, we all know we still love them, but they have these worries, that they're still so very much loved. Things may be changing, but we love them no matter what. I would love to, we have a comment section going, and I would love to see some people's stories or how it went for them when they told their children as well. So for little ones, sometimes it takes them a while to process. It takes, like, we give them this news, and we really don't give much feedback. I think I saw a post on the page the other day where someone said, I told my two kids, and they went right back to like their normal lives, like nothing had been said. And the thing is, for a lot of kids, so first of all, one, they don't have the prejudices that often older people have against the gay community. So saying you're gay to them is like saying you have blue eyes. It means it doesn't have any loadedness with it. It may have loadedness with us, but with kids, they're pretty accepting.
Sometimes people think they should wait to tell their children, but I think the earlier you tell your children, the better, because it's just they're normal then.
Correct. Yeah. That's one of the things that I always say to people is that a lot of times, especially when our kids are little, again, 10 and under, it quickly becomes their normal. And, it becomes their normal that their parent is gay or part of the LGBTQ family. It's just who they are. And it becomes, they just accept it as this is just the way life is. And although we're not talking about divorce, a lot of times with little kids, divorce can be really, divorce for them, like after the initial changes, just quickly becomes their normal. Tonda came from a divorced family, and it was just, and they got divorced when she was young at 3, and it was her normal. I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay. So one thing that I think it's really important, and not everybody does this, I do think it's best to separate the news of your coming out, especially if we are going to be getting divorced as well. I know that some of my clients have done that, and they tell the child that they're gay the same time they tell the child that mom and dad are separating, and that sometimes forever links our queerness with the fact that mom and dad are getting divorced, and that can be problematic. Sometimes people take the blame when a lot of times things in marriages were not very good beforehand. And so, I always recommend that if you can separate the two conversations to different times, that would be really great. I also know that there's some great books out there that people have used. And if you have any of them, please use them in the comments.
And personally, I think that you should, this is obviously everybody's decision, but I think that you should tell your children alone, not with your spouse, so that you can control the narrative.
Well, I think that depends on the marriage. I think that there are times where we need to tell the child about about being gay without our spouse present, but sometimes people have they have other narratives, and sometimes spouses want to be very supportive for the other spouse. So I think so this is the thing, your family, your children, and what is best for them. But these are just some things. This is really more of some things to think about. One good tip for people is try to write down what you want to say. What points do you want to say? What do you want to get across to your children? I think that's especially helpful for kids that are teenagers, because a lot of times teenagers will have a lot of questions about things. And then there are the teenagers that retreat into the room and don't say anything. So sometimes if we write down what we want to say, that can be a really good way to sort of get organized in our head about, what we want to get across to our child or to our children.
And, I mean, teenagers are teenagers. They are embarrassed if you drop them off at school. I mean, they just are.
Yeah.
So if they don't take it the best, it's, a lot of times it's about them not wanting anything to be different or stand out at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, we actually have that as a tip on the street. I mean, on the sheet, not the street. On the sheet, that the thing is children, their first reaction often isn't their last. So you may get like a really positive response, and then later you'll face some anger about other things, or you might get a real angry response, but in a couple of weeks or a couple of days, they're absolutely fine. Just like all the other people in our lives, sometimes children have to have time to process this news, because they're going to look at, especially older children, they're going to see us from a different light that they haven't seen us before. Mm-hmm. And that can be, for me, it was really interesting watching some of my children realizing that I was a separate entity than their dad. Like they always saw us as a couple, but then when I came out to them and all that, they started to realize, oh, mom's her own person besides being married to dad. And so that was a big learning for all of us. So another thing to remember is that sometimes I often hear this from clients where people say, oh, I had this perfect opportunity to tell my son, or my daughter asked me this and I didn't say anything. And I'm always of the belief, if the conversation is happening naturally, like all of a sudden you get this gift where your child asks a question, sometimes that can lead to a very natural conversation with them about what is going on. And, one thing I didn't mention is that, especially with little kids, sometimes they don't understand the words like gay or lesbian or any of the LGBTQ words, just because they don't understand them yet. And so sometimes it can be really as simple as, like, I've had people say, hey, mommy, are you going to ever have a boyfriend again? And literally mom goes, no, but I'll probably have a girlfriend at some point. And that's it. And, they've come out to their kid, and it's just a matter of fact way with no huge announcement.
And I'm of the belief that if anyone ever asks you point blank, that you should tell them. Mm-hmm. You have nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing wrong with who you are. And that's, so I feel that if your kids come out and ask you, you should talk to them about it then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, also too, so I know sometimes in our community, people want to tell certain people before they tell other people. And I completely understand that. Sometimes people want to tell their kids before they tell their parents, or they want to tell their parents before they tell their kids. Or, I feel like honesty is always a really good thing. So I think a really good piece of advice is that don't ask your kids to keep secrets from anyone. Yes. Like if you're not in a place where you can be out to them and whoever they know in their lives, that is probably the best thing to do. And I've had instances too where people have told like a bunch of friends and stuff like that, and inadvertently someone says something to one of the kids, and the kids finds out from a friend or an aunt or an uncle or grandma or grandpa. But the thing is, this is our story to share. And so the only people, our children should hear this story from us, and not our best friend or our sister or our mom and dad, or even our spouse, because I do think it's something that if you have a relationship where your spouse wants to be there and supportive of you, that's great. But the telling of the story should come from you, and because it's your story, and you should be proud of it, and what you're doing is amazing. So also sometimes too, like I had mentioned before, that when we come out to our children, it's often the first time in their lives they see us holistically. So meaning they see us as separate from from our spouses. And so when we share this news, it can be really wonderful because they see us in a way that they've never seen us before. They actually see us as our own unique selves. And so that is one of the really wonderful things about coming out to your children. So now adult children. My kids, when I came out, 3 of them were what we can be considered adults. I'm going to say that they each had their unique responses to this. And I joke, my first one was Switzerland. She really was. My second one was dealing with, they have since come out as non-binary. They were dealing with their own stuff then. And my third one was 19, and he was in love for the first time of his life in college. He pretty much ignored everything until he came home. So kids need time to process. And so by the time your kids are adults, you're going to sort of know how they handle things. So there are people that hate change. There are people that love change. There are people that can have difficult conversation. Sometimes we can have difficult conversations with our kids and they're fine. Sometimes they we send them into anxiety. So one of the things to remember is that our children, especially, all our children are individuals, and they will react to the news of us being not straight like they react to any other news that makes a change in their life somehow. And a lot of times older children, especially if you've been married to your spouse for a long time and you all decide to go your separate ways and to divorce, a lot of times older children have a really hard time with the fact that mom and dad are now divorcing, and they have gotten to their late teens, early 20s. They think mom and dad are going to be there forever in the exact same way. So they not only grieve what was, but they grieve what they thought their adult life was going to be like, going back home to mom and dad's and the way things were. And so sometimes kids just need some time to process.
And it can be disconcerting to them to think about. I mean, if you say that you're gay, you're expressing that you're a sexual being. Right. And they don't really see you as a sexual being. And so, adult children especially think that, oh, that's just, if you're coming out later in life, that's just, they don't want to think about that.
Well, yeah, but that's because a lot of times our kids are straight and they reduce what coming out is to just being about sex, which all of us know that's not true. Mm-hmm. And it's really about getting that emotional connection and having our emotional needs met by somebody of our own gender. But the thing is, a lot of times kids are sort of blindsided with that, like Tonda said, because they never thought of us in that type of way. Sometimes adult children can be completely blindsided by this news. So like 2 of my kids were not. The 2 smaller ones, 2 younger ones were. And for some people, some children too, kids don't live in a vacuum. So even though a lot of times we pretend we're keeping things from them or they don't know there's marital discord, a lot of times kids are very aware of what is going on. So a lot of times when we finally finally acknowledge our queerness, a lot of times it's the piece in the puzzle that's missing from them. And they all of a sudden go, that's right. Now I get that about mom or dad. And also, too, for a lot of us, I've noticed in our community, a lot of us have queer kids. I have a non-binary child. I know Barb has a trans daughter. So, a lot of us do. And so a lot of times, we don't think about this, but when we come out to our children, we are giving permission to our children to be who they were created to be as kids or as teenagers or as young adults. And I think that's a huge gift for them, because they won't have to struggle like we've had to struggle over the years trying to claim our authenticity. So especially with adult children, by the time they're adults, we all know our kids pretty well. And so there's two schools of thought about this, and I'm just going to leave this up to you. I chose to tell my kids, I think I told them all separately at first, but when we got to the news of the divorce, we chose to tell them all together. One of the reasons we did that is that I didn't want to have them talking to each other, like one knowing something about the family while the other one didn't. So sometimes it's best to get your kids in a group and tell them what's going on. Like, I started dating Tonda after I was divorcing their father, and I just heard things from the grapevine through them, and my kids live all over the place. So I actually wrote them an email to tell them that I was dating Tonda and let them know. So they all found out at the exact same time. No one had the information before anybody else. I did tell my youngest one before I emailed his siblings, because he was only 12 at the time. I did talk to him about that on his own, but he also lived with me as well. So your kids, tell them apart. Tell them together. Do they look to each other for support? Are your kids very supportive of each other and really help each other out? And also sometimes, families have power dynamics. So sometimes children, one kid might, hold it over the other one, that they know something about mom that, the other one doesn't know. So I think it's very important that we tell all our kids as soon as possible. That's just my school of thought. I know lots of my clients have done it all different ways, but I just feel like it's a good way to share the information as closely as you can. Sometimes we can't do it all at the same time, but I feel it's important to let the kids know either together or all within the same day if you have to do it apart. Sometimes older and adult children may have fears for you, and what I find is that it's really important to reassure them. They just need to be reassured as much as little kids sometimes, but also to remind them that it's not their job to take care of us. Mm-hmm. And that I remember saying that to one of my children during the whole divorcing process. And I said, honey, it's not your job to take care of me. That's my job. And so thinking about that as well.
They were worried about me. Because sometimes they, are protective of their parents. Mm-hmm. When they start dating.
Mm-hmm. So that's our thoughts about coming out to our kids. We have a great handout. If you want it, please get it from Barb. I don't see any questions. I would love to hear your stories. If you want to put them in this chat, that would be great. Tonda and I will be hosting a workshop on April 23rd from 1 to 5 p.m. Central Time, in which it's curious and questioning. It's for people who are just in the beginning of this journey, either who are questioning or curious about their sexuality. We're going to do some talk around conditioning and social conditioning, and as well as authenticity. It is a great opportunity to spend an afternoon with a bunch of women who understand what it's like to come out later in life. So I hope you join us. The link is in the event here, and I'll put it up. It's also in the groups if you want to join us for the 23rd. So I think that's it. We ended early tonight.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.